Hey, family, welcome back to another episode of the Thriving Diabetic Momcast. I am your host, Candace Norris Jenkins, also known as the Diabetic Mom Coach. And boy, do I have an exciting episode for you tonight. I'm so excited. We are going to be talking about being Black and also having diabetes. So, as many of you can see, I'm a Black woman and have been my entire life. And my special guest today, she's going to talk about just her experiences of navigating the world, being Black, and also being a mom to her daughter who is a type 1. So, for those of you who have never seen me before, I'm Candace Norris Jenkins. I support moms to gain confidence, clarity, and control over diabetes by prioritizing their own self care without the mom guilt. And just so excited to be here today. So, while we wait for our guests to join, do me a favor, drop an emoji, leave us a comment, let us know where you're watching from. It's always so exciting to see all of my supporters and just checking in. You know, Thanksgiving is in a couple days. So, what are you guys having for Thanksgiving? Are you cooking? Are you going to someone else's house? Are you bringing a dish? What's going on? Let us know in the chat. And while you're doing that, I also wanted to let you know I have a couple quick announcements that I'll make. So if you are not already, I wanted to invite you to be a part of the Thriving Diabetic Mom community. So this community is for you if you are a mom, if you're a woman, and you either have diabetes or you're caring for a loved one with diabetes. I want to invite you to be a part of this community. It's a community of other women that are also living with diabetes and supporting each other, doing their very best to support each other. So I'm going to drop a link down in the comments where you can click and join. I'd love to have you to be a part of the community. And also, I wanted to let you know that for Black Friday this year, yes, I'm running a special, guys, 40% off of the Thriving Diabetic Mom Masterclass. And those of you who know anything about my class, this class is amazing. It's a class designed specifically for you, for women who are living with diabetes, and you are a mom or you're caring for a loved one with diabetes. This is a way that you can pour back into yourself. And so I say, what's the best gift that you can give anybody for Christmas or for the holidays? Is just the gift to pour back into themselves. So if you know someone that can use some support around getting their own Thrive system, around taking care of themselves, around taking care of their loved ones with diabetes, let me know and I'd be happy to send you the link. All right, so checking in to see where some of you are coming in from. Okay, keep it coming, guys. So my guest, I want to introduce her. Her name is Elle Cole, and I've got to shout out my girl Eva Wilson. Thanks, Eva. Eva connected us, and she said, I know someone that you may want to talk to. And so Elle is a mom of a type 1 diabetic, as I mentioned. And she is navigating this world, doing a lot of advocacy work. And so without further ado, I'd like to introduce her. Elle,
Hello.
how are you?
Pretty good. Can you
Good,
hear me just
good.
fine? Can you hear me?
I can hear you, but if you could turn your volume up just a little bit, that would be wonderful.
Okay. It could be these headphones. I'm going to do it without the headphones. Can you hear me better?
Okay. But yeah, we can hear you just fine.
Okay. So thank you so much for having me. I'm excited about today's conversation and talking about diabetes. I think, this is a topic that I don't talk a lot about just because I do a lot of advocacy work in the sickle cell community, but I'm this is definitely a part of my life, a big part of my life. And so
Mhm.
I'm happy to be a guest today.
Well, I'm so happy to have you. And I know that, hey, Tony, we got some comments in the chat. Hey, Tony. So, just a little bit of background, that I was explaining to my audience that we were connected through Eva, who's technically my cousin by marriage. And, the first time that we had a conversation, it was like this bomb went off for me because I'm like, wow, she gets it. We were talking about just how your daughter was diagnosed and the things that you have to do now in order to care for her. And we also talked about, we're not going to name them, right? We're not going to do any name dropping, but we talked about some of these organizations who say that they're here for, people living with diabetes or people who are caring for diabetes. But sometimes people that look like you and I, we don't get as welcomed into these spaces. We're not always invited like other people that don't look like us. So I wanted to kind of just start there. What's been your experience? Well, let me back up just a little bit. So maybe you could tell us, I know you told me, but tell us a little bit about um, your daughters or your journey with diabetes and how you came to be the Elle Cole advocacy guru that you are now. How did that start for you?
So I want to go back just to her diagnosis because I think that's really the starting point for me. I knew about type 1, but just like most people, I was confused about the difference between type 1 and type 2. Like I just
Mhm.
never could get it right. And it wasn't until my daughter was diagnosed. And when I found out that she had it, so I just want to say, like, for parents, I know everybody's diagnosis journey is a little bit different, but for my daughter, the symptoms that she presented with was frequent urination.
Mm.
And I remember it was when the movie Selma had come out. And
Mm.
that's not really a kids movie, but for any reason, my family had gotten together and said, "Oh, we're just all gonna go see this movie." And my daughter was 5, so of course I took my kids because I have twins, and they went everywhere I went because I was a homeschooling mom at the time. And so I remember during the movie, she kept needing to go to the bathroom, and I was like, she hasn't, she was drinking, but not super excessively, but the urination was very frequent.
Yeah.
And it was kind of a red flag to me, but I was just like, kids get infections and sick all the time,
Right.
maybe this is just one of those things. And so I didn't think a whole lot about it, but one of my family members who attended the movie with me, she said, that's not normal. So it's actually my niece. My niece, she's a nurse, and she said, you probably should take her into the doctor, Monday morning because it was a Sunday.
Sure.
And so I said, okay, because, I valued what she said. And I took my daughter in. And in that appointment, my daughter has sickle cell disease as well. And so
Mhm.
I just attributed everything to sickle
Right.
cell. As a parent, you're like, well, she has one diagnosis, so everything that
It's
is the
about
root
that.
cause of everything. And
Yeah.
so it turns out I was describing the things to the doctor, because sometimes when you go into your primary care physician's office, you have to see someone else. And
Yeah.
that was the case. It wasn't, the person that we loved the most had been
Yeah.
seen year after year. I had to go in who had the earliest appointment.
Right.
And it was a new provider that I wasn't as familiar with. I had just seen him on the website,
Sure.
but I felt comfortable enough because my daughter had been going to that practice since she was like a month old. And
Okay.
so she was 5. So I was familiar enough where I felt comfortable just, telling all the symptoms and just all of our experience thus far. And he said to me, this this doesn't sound like sickle cell,
Yeah.
you know? Um, and I said, okay. And so he said, let me run a few tests and I'll let you know. So he ran a few tests, and, um, you know, he came back and he said, we have a diagnosis. We know what's wrong with her. And
Yeah.
he said, she has diabetes. And
Mm.
he said, so her doctor's office was like 45 minutes away, the hospital that we go to. And he
Mhm.
said, you're going to need to go there. She's going to have to be checked in overnight, and you're going to have to learn how to take care of her. And
Mm.
so for me, it was a lot of emotions all at once.
Yeah.
And honestly, I'm a mom of twins, and I had taken both of my children at that time. And if anybody has been to the doctors or to a hospital with, children, if they're keeping one overnight, your other child can't stay overnight.
Yeah. Yeah.
And so I was like, what am I going to do? I told my husband. He got off of work. At the time, he was working, in a high traffic area near Tyson's Corner.
Oh gosh. Yeah. For those of you not from the DMV, like this is very high traffic. So
Yes,
yes.
yes. So I was like, oh, just anxiety. I was feeling a lot of anxiety just because of all the moving parts
Yeah.
that it would entail. And so I just kind of had to breathe deeply and said, we got to take this one step at a time. In the moment, it felt like it was just decades where
Yes.
I was just sitting in the moment, like a long pause, just with the world not moving. I was just
Yeah.
stuck in that moment, just hearing those words. She
Yeah.
has diabetes. And so honestly, it was a lot to take on in that moment because I mentioned she had another diagnosis. And I was just like, you know, I'm a religious person. So I was like, God, this is a lot.
Yeah.
Like,
Yes.
you're giving me all of this at once.
Yeah.
And I was like, I didn't have any family, so I couldn't necessarily turn to, a mom or a sister or a
Yeah.
cousin. I didn't have anybody. It was just me and my husband. And,
Yeah.
thankfully that first night he had to stay with her because I had to be with our other daughter at
Sure.
home.
Yeah.
And so I just had to make a decision that I wasn't going to let the diagnosis freeze our lives,
Yeah.
because it can feel like just life pauses. Life just is on pause for a
Yes.
long period of time.
I love your story. The first time I heard it, I just really empathized with you. I saw that my mom joined the chat. Hey, mom! But like you, my mom had that same story where I was. And number one, I kind of wanted to talk about the whole diversity conversation, even around the diagnosis, because sometimes, like my mother was told when she presented the same symptoms that I had, just as your daughter had. Well, and this was back again 30 years ago, so keep that in mind. But she was told that kind of like, she didn't know her own child, and she was said the doctor told her, oh, she just has the flu. Go give her some medication and let her stay home. And it wasn't really taken seriously. And I always wondered from my counterparts, did they have a different experience even around the diagnosis? So I really empathize with you, just being a mom, of course, and having your child being told you had a diagnosis. So let me go back to what you said about the support, about you not having support. So where did you find support? Because that's so vital and it's so important, like in this landscape of being newly diagnosed, especially. But where did you go to for support?
So you mentioned earlier just about the organizations that exist. When we were in the hospital, they gave us what was called a bag of hope.
Okay.
And along with that, there was a paper to sign up for a mentor. And
Mm.
so after those 3 days were up, I did get a phone call from another parent I did not know. They were not, we didn't have the same ethnicity,
Okay.
but it was good to hear from somebody that said, hey, my wife, it was actually the husband. He was saying, my wife and I, we have been through this. So I'm here to tell you, you can get through it.
Yeah.
And even though, I can't say we had a whole lot in common. I don't even remember his name,
Okay.
but just hearing that he was able to get through this with his wife, I knew that I would be able to get through it. So it was really just that solidarity
Yeah.
in that moment. And I appreciated that. And I felt like it was a source of comfort.
Yeah.
But I did have to be honest, virtual support. Like here it is, a phone call. That
Yeah.
is not the same.
Yeah.
Those first years, those first months are difficult.
Yeah.
And as a family unit, your life changes. My
Yeah.
life is not like it was before. That diagnosis, the day is cemented in my mind. I remember
Hmm.
the exact date. I remember the time. I remember literally everything because
Yeah.
it's kind of like the before and after. And
Yeah.
as somebody who considers myself a strong woman,
Hmm.
I had to be honest with my family. This is what I am dealing with, and I need some help. I need somebody to come and help me. What I will say is, my family, sometimes when that diagnosis happens in our community, there is judgment.
Mm.
What did
Yes.
you do?
Mm.
What did you do to cause this?
Yes.
And I rejected those notions.
Yes.
I did share it with my friends, and people were like, "Oh, we need to send you a cookbook. We need to, you
Yeah.
know," and all of that. But really, we were very healthy people in the way that we ate and the things that I brought in. So it wasn't about that, and I had to really kind of train my family to understand and change their way of thinking about diabetes and autoimmune diseases.
Right.
And
Right.
I had to tell them, look, this is an autoimmune disease. It's
Hmm.
not something I did to, to my child.
Right.
And I feel like in some ways that was accepted. But I
Hmm.
think, in our community, people say, oh, they got that sugar.
Yep. Got the sugar. Hmm.
So it was like, oh, like you're dealing with all of these archaic beliefs.
Yes.
And you're trying to be strong in that moment. But it's like, look, I just got to be honest with people. I
Yes.
I had to learn so that I could educate others. And I
There you
think that
go.
first
Yes.
moment is survival. How
Yes.
do I help my daughter survive? So
Right.
so that's where it was initially. And then after that, I had to help my family unit understand and support me in a way that I appreciated their input. Because
Right.
sometimes, we don't really want the extra
Yeah,
help.
we don't want, yeah, and the judgment that comes along with it. So
Right.
so Elle, I love how you said, I had to really learn how to really do life over and not listen to the we love our family, we do, but especially sometimes in the Black community, our family members and the people that are closest to us can be so judgmental, and it comes from a place of concern, but it also comes from a place of like lack of education, right?
Right.
So thankfully now my family is wonderful. Like they say, we know you got it, we don't say anything, but as a kid with diabetes, I was told, you can never eat cake, you can never have sweets, don't even think about it. You just need to watch everybody else while they, eat whatever they want. And I'm just like kind of sitting there being isolated. And so how now, and I wanted to also shout out my mom because she and I did a video of what I wish I knew when raising my child with diabetes, and she talked about. I always tell this to other moms. She talked about now, in retrospect, what she would have done then, and what she wished she would have known then, and she always says, I just would have come from a more inclusive place rather than you can't do this and you can't do that. Like, well, what can you do? And how can we manage it, and how can we make it fit? But one thing my mom also taught me, which now I work with, of course, other moms, teaching them my Thrive system, how they can thrive with diabetes. And I always say to the moms that are caring for children with diabetes that you have to be their biggest advocate, because they're not in a place yet where they can advocate for themselves. And sometimes navigating through the health system. I think I told you that I've had 2 kidney transplants. And so just all of the logistics and the going forth with that, even with diabetes, it can be a lot, right? And so I know your daughters are young, but how have you or have you found any barriers that you think could be cultural? I know last week I was talking to one woman, and she does like these live eating or cooking demonstrations. And she focuses primarily on the Black community, because she says sometimes when you go to these physicians or these clinical people, they'll tell you eat this and not that, but the this may not be the cultural foods that we're used to eating, right? It may not resonate with us because we may not eat that certain stuff. So, how have you advocated for your both of your daughters, but particularly your daughter living with type 1? How have you had to advocate for her?
You know, I remember in those early appointments, and she had so many different specialists. We had to travel from different places. And I think, just kind of navigating the healthcare system is difficult in
Yeah,
general.
yeah.
But when it comes to type 1 diabetes in this area, she had several doctors.
Mm,
But when she had to get like her 3 month checkup,
yep.
because at first, every 3 months they
Sure.
want to do your lab work. And
Hmm.
so for her, I remember going into one of the appointments, and this was the appointment where they give you kind of like a wristband or a necklace that says that you're diabetic.
Yeah.
And I remember her asking me, "Well, what did she eat today?" And
Hmm.
it just had a condescending tone.
Sure.
But I was like, I don't have to receive it that way.
Yeah.
I was scared. So I would write everything down. I just showed her what I wrote down.
Right.
Um, and it was a journey for me to also just kind of get rid of my own bias that exists,
Mm.
because I felt like I had already been introduced to the medical community, because my daughter that has type 1, she does have another, medical condition. And
Hmm.
so I wasn't it was, some of the similar places, but it wasn't a place where I felt comfortable at first. And
Okay.
so what I had to do, I had to learn how to speak up and
Yes.
be comfortable and
Mm.
talk about the things that I was concerned about. So in those early appointments, they have a nutritionist, which I think
Mhm.
is great. But
Yes.
I think also there are cultural differences.
Yes.
And for us, we're actually vegetarian. And so getting them to kind of understand, like, well, I want her to have her protein, what are some healthy options?
Sure.
Because, you know, it was just a lot in navigating what our differences were,
Yeah.
and how to really make sure that that my daughter isn't just getting processed food, because I feel like in that early time they're like, oh, count your carbs. And I
Yeah.
know they didn't do that in the past, but
Yeah.
that's what they do now. They want you to count all the carbs. And
Yes.
as a mom who really cooked from scratch,
Yeah.
a lot of the meals that my kids ate, they were meals I prepared. So that
Right.
meant measuring things, looking at the nutrition fact, having
Hmm.
those cups
Yes.
and all of that. And we had the scale. We went and bought a scale. It
Yep.
was
I
it was
remember that.
so many processes. So that whole it was a lot to process. And
Yeah.
so I'm talking to the dietitian, like, this is a lot to navigate,
Yeah.
with the scale, because they're telling you to get all the things. And then on top of that, they're also telling you, well, right now we want her to do her shots and her finger pricks with a diabetic meter, but we also want you to get ready for the continuous glucose monitor
Yep.
or the insulin pump. So you're
Insulin
like,
pump.
look, let me get a handle of this
Yes.
and then
Yeah.
add on the different treatment
Yeah.
options. So I think, and you're also learning the new vocabulary. So
Yes.
it's like you're being immersed in a new environment with
Yes.
language.
Yep.
You
And all these acronyms and
correct.
what is a
Right.
CGM?
All of these words. And so, people like, if you join a Facebook group, because all of a sudden you're a part of this new community, people are saying
Right.
DKA,
Yeah.
diversity. They're
Yeah.
saying all these things. And you're like, what are they talking about?
Yes.
So it was kind of like a shock to our system where we
Mhm.
just had to learn very quickly.
Yeah.
And I remember one of my family members said, "Oh, I'm so happy that it happened to you because you're going to fight for your daughter." And I remember feeling, hurt by
Yeah.
that comment. It wasn't meant to be an insult,
Sure.
but
Sure.
it was like it was a heavy weight. Like I
Yeah.
don't want this.
Yeah. Yeah.
But the good news is we've been able to navigate it. And
Yeah.
although you encounter some things that are difficult, you encounter a medical system that's confusing,
Yeah.
dealing with pharmacies, trying to
Mhm.
make sure you get your prescriptions correct. And,
Yes.
with diabetes, you have a lot of accessories trying to
Oh,
figure out how things are covered. So
yes.
with we have a private insurance where we have to run the insulin first in order
Oh,
to get other things covered correctly.
yeah.
Really, at first, I didn't know that. And I was like, these things are really adding up. It's very
Yep.
costly, paying extra for lab work,
Mhm.
really just trying to navigate it, but then learning the questions to ask. Because
Right.
I'm like, it cannot be this hard for everybody. So being able and aware enough to take inventory and say, okay, I'm going to write this down so I can remember for next time. This is what worked. This is what different. And I will say that we've been on this journey. My daughter was 5 when
Mhm.
she was diagnosed. No, she was 6. I'm sorry. She was
Okay.
6 when she was diagnosed, and now she's 16. So she's had it for 10 years.
Mm.
And there are times where we still have to navigate the
Mhm.
the pharmacy.
Yeah.
I would say dealing with prescriptions, making sure we get all the supplies on time. That's
Yep.
really the hardest part that
Yes.
we deal with. And then communicating, because my daughter is now a teenager, and of
Yeah.
course she wants to do everything herself.
Sure.
She doesn't really want us to monitor. She wants the freedom to make her
Yeah.
choices. And
Yeah.
so it's loving her enough to give her to let go a little bit, allow
Yeah.
her to learn, but then give her a safe space so that you can critique as
Yeah.
well. So
I love.
that's the area that we're in now.
Well, kudos to you. This it's such a big task, like you said, like your family member said. Thank God that it was you, and I mean that in the best way possible. But thank God it was you because it sounds like you've been equipped and that you are, doing a great job with advocating. So, with all of that said, here's my last question. With all that you have going on, now you have these 16-year-olds, and your daughter is both type 1 and also has another autoimmune disease. How are you taking care of you? What are you doing so that with everything that you have going on, with all of your advocacy and your career and everything else, being a mom and a wife, how are you taking care of you?
Woo. I've had to learn. I've had to learn how to take care of me. And
Yeah,
so for to be very honest, that means that on the weekends I don't do a whole lot. I try to
yeah,
make that self time and
right.
family time. And when I can pause, I do.
Yeah.
So I enjoy silence. I
Mm,
enjoy peace.
yes.
Sometimes, as a parent, you are shuttling your kids from
Yeah.
place to place. Like they have a ton of
Amen.
things that they do. And so I now find value in
Yeah.
those quiet moments in the car where, sometimes it's just listening to what you want to listen to.
Yes. Yes.
And then just hearing yourself breathe. And so what I'm mentioning are things that are free.
Yes.
I don't always get an opportunity, to go and do things that people label as self-care. I'm
Sure.
just going to be honest.
Yeah.
But I do try to incorporate them as much as possible. But for the most part, for me, one of the things that I did, I actually bought a massage chair for my house
Ooh,
because I
nice.
can't always get to a massage parlor. I
Sure.
One year I was like, oh, I'll just go once a month, and I thought that was really a great idea. But you know how we, make New Year's resolutions and things
Yes.
like that. It was really not attainable for me, and I
Yeah.
said, but like they have big box stores that sell like these chairs, and I was
Yeah.
like, I can get one of those for my house. That's
Yeah,
something that I
yeah,
can invest in for myself because I can get, 15 minutes to pause maybe between calls and things like that
yes.
because I work remotely, I work from home. And so sometimes I'll go and sit in the chair. It has music. Music is very therapeutic for
I
me. I'm a
agree.
writer. So journaling is a way that I practice self care and also making time for therapy.
Yeah,
To me, that is huge. That's a huge piece to it that
yeah.
we don't always talk about in our community. But so my daughter, she has, an autoimmune disease, but she also has a genetic disorder. And I think there's a lot of weight to carry
Mm,
that because as a parent, sometimes you see your role in,
mm,
allowing these things to be a part of your life. And
right.
um, I had to learn how to focus on the good,
Yeah.
focus on the reality of it too. Because I think there are some times when you can kind of live in la la land and say, oh,
Yes.
everything is just great. But that's not always realistic. I like
Yes.
to be real about, hey, this is difficult, but
Yeah.
this is what we can do about it. So
Right.
acknowledging the problem, but then
Hmm.
trying to come up with a realistic solution. That's where I'm at. I'm not trying
Yeah.
to pretend like
Sure.
everything is easy
Yep.
because there are some hard days. That is
Yeah.
that is the reality of
That's the
it.
reality. Absolutely.
But what I find joy in is in knowing that I can be honest with myself about, I love my child, I love my family, but that means that I have to make sure that I'm going to my own appointments.
Yes.
I'm making sure that I'm doing the things that I need to do to stay
Yes.
healthy.
To stay healthy. Yes.
And I think sometimes we don't put doctor's appointments on our self care list. We're like,
Mm.
okay, that's not self care. But for me, it is.
It is absolutely because if you're not well, how are you going to keep up and take care of everyone else, right? I tell moms all the time, like you cannot pour from an empty cup, not even from like a half full cup. You really have to get to the place where you're pouring out is coming from your overflow. And so with when you have done all the things that you need to do to make sure that you are fully functioning both physically, emotionally, spiritually, then that's when you can start pouring out. And guess what? That overflow, it's like, oh man, that's the best of you, right? I have to kind of train moms to think of it as like you're actually giving the best of you when you have everything that you need. You're completely full. Now you're actually pouring out onto your family and they get the absolute best of you. So I
Yeah.
love that.
And I think just to your point about the best of you, I think when we are stressed, when we're overworked, when we're tired, a lot of times we're snippy with our kids.
Yes.
And when our children have, diabetes in particular, that can affect how we show up in caring for them, how
Yes.
we bring things up when, so my daughter does have a CGM now.
Mhm.
And she was like, Mom, sometimes all you do is tell me to, correct. All you do is mention my number,
Yeah.
but also making sure that we tell our kids, hey, I love you just
Right.
because, not everything is not about this illness, not allowing that, illness to control our entire communication,
Right.
our lives.
Yes.
It can dictate so much, like when we go on vacation, how long
Yes.
you have that, it's just a
Yes.
lot. But I think you know, the more that you write things down and kind of, just take that pressure off yourself, everything isn't going to be perfect.
Yes.
But doing your best
Yeah.
and accepting that and receiving it, that is powerful in and of itself. So that's where I'm at. That's where I am in this whole thing. And last year, for the first time, I let my daughter go on an overnight. Well, it wasn't the first time. So in the last 3 years, she's been able to go on short trips with her
Okay.
school. And that was really big for me.
Yeah. Yeah. That's huge.
The monitoring is a lot.
Yeah.
But I have to say, my child is growing up. One day she's
Yeah.
going to have to do this. If she doesn't start with these little, 4-day, 5-day,
Yeah.
weekly trips,
Sure.
be given an opportunity to do it herself. So
Yeah.
I've had to learn how to do that
Yeah.
and say, I don't want to shelter her because these
Mhm.
things exist.
Yeah.
She's brilliant. She's, intelligent. Allow her to be those things,
Right.
even in the midst of.
Yes.
I'm not going to find balance as a
Yeah.
parent. There will be a part of me that worries.
Yeah. Of
That
course.
is just going to be normal from here on out. And I had to say, I can find freedom in
Mm.
breathe. And for me, I've mentioned the word pausing a lot
Yeah.
because the deep breaths, just taking a few minutes of deep breaths, um, you know, you can have like a device. Like for me, I have an Apple Watch and it'll
Yeah.
say, stand. It'll say
Yeah.
take a deep breath. Those things, as simple as they are, they mean
Yes.
a lot to me. And I
Yeah.
say that because there is a lot of responsibility on my plate, but having an opportunity to be reminded to breathe,
Yes.
is healing for me. And
Yeah.
so that's the way I want to direct my children and guide them so
Yeah.
that they'll be able to breathe. When life gets hard for them, they'll
Yeah.
learn how to handle the adversity.
Absolutely.
So
Absolutely.
that's just a part of it, a part of
Well,
the.
I absolutely love that. I knew that I really wanted you to be a guest on the show because it's so important, especially as Black women. We're not always taught these things. Um, we're taught to be stressed out and yell and scream, and I love how you're teaching your daughters. You're actually empowering your daughters to make great decisions. You're teaching them how to make good decisions so when they grow up, you know they'll be able to make good decisions as adults, and I love that. And as a part of the Thrive system, it's all about finding your value even beyond the diagnosis. So I love that you're also teaching your daughter that, hey, you're more than diabetes. Like, this is not who you are. Yes, you have diabetes, it's a part of our lives, but that's not who you are as a person. So I love that. And I love that you said, I'm just picking apart some gems, but I love that you said that you're okay with not being balanced. I'm okay with it too. And I actually consider diabetes is like, it's not really a balance, it's more of a flow. It kind of changes, it goes in and out sometimes, and I'm okay with like going with that flow. And so I know that you're busy, but if someone wants to find you online, where can we follow you on social media?
Sure. So I'm on social media at Cleverly Changing. And I'm also on Instagram at I am Elle Cole.
Okay.
And I have a podcast. I need to revive it, but Cleverly Changing Podcast. And those
Okay.
are some of the places. I'm on Facebook at Cleverly Changing. I'm still on Twitter. I know people are on Blue Sky. Haven't moved over to Blue Sky. I'm on TikTok, but I really haven't been posting. But I show up online because it is an outlet. It
Yeah.
allows me an opportunity to kind of see what's going on in the rest of the world. And I think what social media has done is given us all a voice,
Yeah.
and it's helped us find our different communities. And so
Yes.
for me, that has been huge, finding a community of caregivers who
Yeah.
are understanding. I just had a caregiver the other day send me some information about a diabetes event, and that's what I love about
Yes.
community, because there may be something going on that we don't know about, but
Yes.
somebody says, "Hey, you'll find value. You
Yes.
may find value in this, so I'm
Yeah.
going to tell you about it." And so while I still don't have a lot of family around me, I have found family in the midst of friends.
Yes.
And I think for those people who, are just looking for a way to find their way to cope, find
Mhm.
their system of peace, sometimes that could be choosing your support group, choosing your friend group, and
Yes.
choosing people who will breathe life into you. And
Yes.
so that's what I've done. And that's how I try to show up online. I try to, share information that is helpful for others. I used to share a whole lot more online, as many of us probably did. But, as life would have it, I do a lot in the advocacy space.
Yeah.
And particularly, I just wrote a book about I believe in therapy, and that's
Mm,
really getting people to understand about pausing and writing, the beauty of writing, but also how to vet and find a therapist that's right for you. Because
mm,
all of the times, you can meet somebody and say, oh, and talk to them, but realize that person and I don't see eye to eye. They don't
right.
get me. And I think it's really important for us to find professionals that get us,
Yes.
because sometimes, we lean on a friend, we lean on other people who are not actually equipped to help us.
Right.
And so I believe in, letting my community know there are professionals out there who
Yeah.
are equipped
Yes.
and can help us navigate this journey, because showing up as a Black woman in the US, there are a lot of balls that we carry.
Yes.
And so we have to do that in a way where we have different input that's
Yeah.
positive and
Sure.
resolute. And so that's what I try to do now. I try to write books that really give my community an opportunity to understand. So as I learn, I try to teach.
I love it. I love it. And I just want to thank you for being here. This was such an amazing conversation. And if you don't have a community, feel free, like I said, to join the Thriving Diabetic Mom community. Women like Elle and myself who are here, we've been through it. We can help you through it. So I'll put a link down in the chat. I'm also going to put a link to Elle's, all of her socials. So if you'd like to find her on social media and follow her, her links will also be in the chat. And I'm going to wish you all a very, very happy Thanksgiving. Enjoy the time with your family and your loved ones. You're more than a diagnosis. Remember that. And like Elle said, just pass it along. Keep empowering each other, keep uplifting each other. And that's, we can do this, and we are doing it. So thanks again, Elle. It was such a pleasure.
Well, thank you so much for having me. And if you're listening and you want to reach out, feel free to do so.
Absolutely. All right. Until next week. Bye bye.